In a quiet little town surrounded by rolling green hills and thick forests, there was a lake so beautiful that it almost felt magical. The water shimmered under the sunlight during the day, and at night, it reflected the stars like a giant mirror. This wasn't just any lake. It was the heart of the town, where families gathered for picnics, kids splashed around in the summer, and fishermen cast their lines hoping to catch the biggest trout. For Alex, this place wasn't just part of the town. It was home. Alex had grown up on the shores of this lake. His family's cabin sat right beside it, nestled among tall pine trees. It wasn't fancy, just a simple wooden structure with creaky floors and mismatched furniture, but it held decades of memories. Every summer since he was a child, Alex spent his days here. He fished off the old dock, swam in the cool water, and explored the woods nearby. The lake had shaped who he was, teaching him patience when waiting for fish to bite and courage when venturing into deeper waters. To Alex, this piece of land wasn't just property, it was a legacy passed down from his grandparents and parents. One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Alex decided to take out his kayak. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Mist hovered above the water, giving the lake an ethereal glow. Paddling quietly, Alex let himself soak in the peacefulness of the moment. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the only sound breaking the silence was the gentle splash of his oar dipping into the water. But something felt different today. As Alex rounded the bend near his dock, he noticed a figure standing there. At first glance, she looked completely out of place. Dressed in sleek high heels, tailored slacks, and a blazer, she stood awkwardly on the uneven ground, holding a clipboard tightly against her chest. Her sharp features and perfectly styled hair made her seem more suited to a corporate office than this rustic corner of nature. Curious, Alex paddled closer until he could see her clearly. When he stepped out of the kayak onto the dock, the woman turned toward him. She didn't smile or offer a friendly greeting. Instead, she fixed him with a steely gaze that sent a shiver down his spine. "Are you Alexander?" she asked, her voice clipped and professional. "Yes," Alex replied cautiously, unsure what to make of this stranger. "That's me. Can I help you?" The woman straightened up, adjusting her posture as if preparing for a presentation. "My name is Victoria Hargrove," she said, extending a manicured hand. Alex shook it briefly before she continued. "I'm the regional manager of Lakeview Estates Development Corporation." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Lakeview Estates? Never heard of it." Victoria gave him a tight-lipped smile as if expecting his ignorance. "Well, allow me to explain. We've recently acquired several parcels of land surrounding this lake." She gestured vaguely at the shoreline, "including your plot." Alex blinked, certain he must have misheard her. "Excuse me, we now own the entirety of this waterfront area," Victoria clarified, flipping open her clipboard to reveal documents filled with legal jargon. "Unfortunately, your current residence falls within our development zone. You'll need to vacate the premises immediately." For a moment, Alex simply stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Was this some kind of joke? How could someone come out of nowhere and claim ownership of his family's land? He felt anger bubbling inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I think you've got the wrong information," Alex said firmly. "This land has been in my family for generations. My grandfather built this cabin himself. There's no way you can just show up and kick me off." Victoria sighed dramatically, as though dealing with difficult people was a regular part of her job. "Look, Mr. She glanced at her notes. "Mr. Reynolds, is it? I understand this might be upsetting, but these are the facts. Our company has purchased all necessary rights to proceed with our plans. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to involve legal action." Legal action? Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. Who did this woman think she was? He clenched his fists, resisting the urge to argue further. Instead, he took a deep breath and nodded stiffly. "All right," he said. "If that's how you want to play it, fine, but don't expect me to leave without a fight." With that, Alex walked past her, heading back toward his cabin. Behind him, Victoria watched silently, her expression unreadable. As soon as he stepped inside, Alex slammed the door shut and leaned against it, letting out a frustrated groan. What was happening? How could anyone possibly think they could take away something so deeply tied to his family's history? Over the next few hours, Alex tried to focus on chores around the cabin, but his mind kept drifting back to Victoria's words. Something about her demeanor and those documents didn't sit right with him. Determined to get answers, he grabbed his keys and drove into town. His first stop was the local library, where he spent hours poring over old maps and records. Then he visited the county courthouse, digging through dusty archives to trace the history of his family's property. What he found shocked him. Decades ago, his grandfather had signed a conservation agreement with the state, ensuring that the land would remain protected from large-scale development. According to the paperwork, this agreement still held weight, meaning Victoria's claims were likely invalid. Armed with this knowledge, Alex felt a renewed sense of determination. He wouldn't let this stranger waltz in and destroy everything his family had worked so hard to preserve. Back at the lake later that evening, Alex stood on his dock, staring out at the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Despite the chaos of the day, the lake remained unchanged, a constant reminder of why he needed to fight. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. This battle was far from over. The next morning, Alex woke up with a sense of purpose. The sun had barely risen, but he was already dressed and ready to dive deeper into the mystery surrounding his land. Armed with the documents he'd uncovered at the courthouse, he decided to visit some of the older residents in town, people who might remember stories about the lake and its history. He knew that sometimes the best answers weren't written down, they were passed down through generations. His first stop was Mr. Thompson's house, a small cottage on the edge of town. Mr. Thompson, or Old Tom, as everyone called him, was in his late 80s and had lived by the lake longer than anyone else. His memory wasn't perfect, but when it came to the lake, he was like a walking encyclopedia. Alex knocked on the door, and after a moment, Old Tom answered, leaning heavily on his cane. "Alex, what brings you here so early?" Tom asked with a warm smile, ushering him inside. "I need your help, Tom," Alex said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Someone's trying to take my family's land. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything I don't know." Tom's expression turned serious. "Take your land? Who would do such a thing?" Alex explained everything. Victoria's sudden appearance, her claims about owning the lakefront, and the conservation agreement he'd found. As he spoke, Tom listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Alex finished, Tom leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Well, son," Tom began, "your grandpa wasn't just a builder, he was a fighter. Back in the day, developers were always sniffing around this place, trying to turn it into something flashy. But your grandpa didn't let them. He worked hard to get that conservation agreement signed because he believed the lake should stay natural, for fishing, swimming, and living simple lives." Tom went on to share stories Alex had never heard before. How his grandfather had rallied neighbors to oppose big projects, how he'd stood toe-to-toe with lawyers and politicians, and how he'd even organized protests when things got heated. Hearing these tales made Alex feel both proud and inspired. His grandfather hadn't just protected the land, he'd fought for it. After leaving Tom's house, Alex visited other longtime residents. Each person added pieces to the puzzle. Mrs. Harper, who ran the local bakery, told him about petitions signed decades ago to block commercial development. Mr. Patel, the owner of the general store, showed him old newspaper clippings detailing community efforts to preserve the lake. Every story reinforced one truth. The lake wasn't just Alex's. It belonged to everyone who loved it. But while Alex was gathering support, Victoria wasn't sitting idle. Word spread quickly in a small town, and soon enough, she started making moves to counteract Alex's growing momentum. She sent formal letters to Alex demanding he vacate the property within 30 days. When that didn't work, she hired surveyors to stake out the boundaries of the land, claiming they were verifying ownership. One afternoon, Alex returned from running errands to find bright orange flags planted along the edge of his property. marking where fences would supposedly go. Furious, Alex confronted the surveyors. "You can't just come here and put these markers without permission," he shouted. One of the men shrugged. "We're just doing our job, buddy. Take it up with management if you've got a problem." Management. That meant Victoria. Alex clenched his jaw but didn't argue further. Instead, he pulled out his phone and snapped photos of the flags as evidence. If things went to court, he wanted proof of every step Victoria took to intimidate him. To make matters worse, Victoria began using more aggressive tactics. Security guards appeared near Alex's cabin, patrolling the area as if they owned it. Locals reported seeing unfamiliar trucks parked along the road, loaded with equipment. Rumors circulated that Victoria planned to tear down the cabin and build luxury condos in its place. It felt like a siege, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being backed into a corner. Despite the mounting pressure, Alex refused to give up. He reached out to environmental groups hoping to enlist their support. One organization, called Save Our Shores, agreed to send representatives to assess the potential impact of Victoria's proposed development. They conducted tests on the water quality, studied the local wildlife, and interviewed residents about how the lake contributed to their daily lives. Their findings were alarming. Victoria's plans would disrupt the ecosystem, pollute the water, and drive away native species. Armed with this new information, Alex held a meeting at the town hall. Dozens of people showed up, neighbors, friends, and even strangers who cared about preserving the lake. For the first time, Alex stood in front of a crowd, speaking passionately about why the lake mattered. He talked about his family's history, the conservation agreement, and the dangers posed by unchecked development. The room erupted in applause when he finished, and several attendees offered to help however they could. Meanwhile, cracks began to form in Victoria's polished facade. Her attempts to win over the community weren't going as smoothly as she'd hoped. At a public presentation she hosted to showcase her vision for Lakeview Estates, angry residents bombarded her with questions. Why hadn't she consulted them earlier? What guarantees did she have that her project wouldn't harm the environment? And most importantly, how could she justify taking land that had been in families for generations? Victoria struggled to answer convincingly. Her rehearsed speeches about economic growth and modern amenities fell flat against the raw emotion of people fighting for their home. By the end of the night, she looked visibly rattled, though she tried to hide it behind a mask of professionalism. Back at his cabin, Alex felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time since Victoria arrived, he didn't feel alone in this fight. The community was rallying behind him, and he had concrete evidence to challenge her claims. But he also knew the battle was far from over. Victoria had resources, connections, and lawyers ready to crush anyone who stood in her way. If Alex wanted to protect the lake, he'd need to be smarter, stronger, and more determined than ever. As he sat on his porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Alex realized something important. This wasn't just about saving his family's land anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, for the lake, for the town, and for future generations. Whatever happened, next he vowed to see it through until the very end. The momentum was building, and Alex could feel it. What had started as a personal fight to save his family's land had grown into something much bigger, a movement fueled by the passion of an entire community. People who barely knew each other before were now working together, united by their shared love for the lake. It wasn't just about stopping Victoria anymore. It was about protecting a way of life that generations had cherished. One afternoon, Alex met with representatives from Save Our Shores, the environmental group he'd contacted earlier. They brought charts, graphs, and detailed reports, highlighting the potential damage Victoria's development would cause. The data was overwhelming: increased pollution from construction runoff, destruction of habitats for native fish and birds, and long-term harm to the water quality. But what struck Alex most was how clearly the group connected these issues to everyday life. For example, if the lake became polluted, swimming and fishing, the activities that drew people to the area, would no longer be safe or enjoyable. This isn't just bad for nature, one of the representatives explained. It's bad for the town. Tourists won't come here if the lake is ruined, and businesses will suffer. Armed with this information, Alex decided to take the fight directly to Victoria. He filed a formal complaint with local authorities, challenging her company's claims and demanding an investigation into their practices. To his surprise, the response was swift. Within days, inspectors arrived at the lake, examining everything, from the soil composition to the wildlife populations. Word spread quickly, and soon even more residents joined the effort, offering testimonies about why the lake mattered to them. But Victoria wasn't going down without a fight. She launched a full-scale PR campaign, painting herself as a visionary leader bringing progress to a stagnant town. Billboards went up along the main road, showcasing glossy images of luxury condos and marinas. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, promising jobs, higher property values, and state-of-the-art amenities. At first, some people were swayed. After all, who wouldn't want a shiny new resort instead of an old cabin? But Alex and his supporters worked tirelessly to counteract her messaging. They organized cleanup days at the lake, inviting locals to participate and see firsthand why preserving its natural beauty was so important. They held storytelling nights where elders shared memories of growing up by the water. And they created social media pages, sharing photos and videos of the lake's serene landscapes alongside facts about the dangers of overdevelopment. Slowly but surely, public opinion began to shift. Victoria's tactics grew increasingly desperate. When charm failed, she turned to intimidation. Security guards stationed near Alex's cabin started patrolling more aggressively, sometimes lingering, uncomfortably close to his property line. Neighbors reported receiving threatening letters warning them not to get involved. One evening, Alex discovered that someone had slashed the tires on his truck while it was parked outside his cabin. Though nothing was outright illegal, the message was clear: back off, or face consequences. Despite the hostility, Alex refused to be intimidated. Instead, he leaned harder into the support of his allies. Local activists helped him set up a legal defense fund, raising money through bake sales, car washes, and online donations. Lawyers volunteered their time to review documents and prepare arguments. Even kids got involved, creating posters that read, "Save our lake," and hanging them around town. The sense of unity was palpable, and Alex felt a deep gratitude for everyone who stood by him. Then came a breakthrough. During a routine meeting with Save Our Shores, Alex learned about whistleblowers within Victoria's own company. Apparently, several employees were uncomfortable with the unethical practices they'd witnessed during similar projects elsewhere. These insiders agreed to meet with Alex secretly, providing damning evidence of forged documents, falsified permits, and bribes paid to officials to push through developments. One whistleblower, a former project manager named Sarah, proved particularly valuable. She revealed that Victoria's team often exploited loopholes in zoning laws, acquiring land under questionable circumstances and bulldozing opposition with scare tactics. In Alex's case, Sarah confirmed that the conservation agreement signed by his grandfather should have protected the property indefinitely, but Victoria's company had deliberately ignored it, assuming no one would notice. With this new evidence in hand, Alex's lawyer filed a motion to halt all development activities until the matter could be resolved in court. The judge granted the request, issuing a temporary injunction that stopped Victoria's plans dead in their tracks. For the first time since her arrival, Victoria looked genuinely rattled. Her confident smile faltered during interviews, and she began avoiding questions from reporters. Still, Alex knew better than to celebrate too soon. Victoria still had resources and connections, and she wouldn't give up easily. As the court date approached, tensions in the town reached a fever pitch. Supporters of the lake wore green ribbons to show solidarity, while those backing Victoria sported blue pins symbolizing progress. Arguments broke out at grocery stores and coffee shops, dividing friends and families. The once peaceful town felt like it was on the brink of chaos. Through it all, Alex remained focused. He spent hours preparing for the trial, reviewing documents, rehearsing statements, and consulting with experts. His team worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was covered. On the eve of the court hearing, Alex gathered with his closest supporters at the lake. Sitting around a bonfire, they shared stories, laughed, and reminded themselves why they wwere fighting. For Alex, it was a moment of clarity. This wasn't just about winning. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter how hard the battle might be. As the fire crackled and sparks floated into the night sky, Alex looked out at the lake. Its surface shimmered under the moonlight, calm and unchanging despite the storm brewing around it. No matter what happened next, he vowed to protect this place, not just for himself, but for everyone who loved it. With renewed determination, he prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The day of the trial arrived, and the small courtroom buzzed with anticipation. People packed into the wooden benches, some wearing green ribbons to show their support for Alex, others sporting blue pins to back Victoria's vision of progress. Reporters lined the back of the room, notebooks in hand, eager to capture every detail of what promised to be a dramatic showdown. For Alex, the weight of the moment was almost overwhelming. This wasn't just about his family's land anymore. It was about justice, fairness, and the future of an entire community. As the judge entered and took his seat, the room fell silent. The proceedings began with opening statements. Victoria's lawyer, a sharp-suited man with a commanding voice, painted a picture of innovation and prosperity. He spoke passionately about how Lakeview Estates would bring jobs, tourism, and modern amenities to the town. "This is progress," he declared, gesturing dramatically. "We're not here to take away from the community. We're here to enhance it." When it was Alex's turn, his lawyer stood up and immediately shifted the tone. Instead of flashy rhetoric, she focused on facts. She presented documents showing the conservation agreement signed by Alex's grandfather decades ago, emphasizing that it explicitly protected the land from commercial development. Then came the evidence provided by the whistleblowers. Emails revealing forged signatures, falsified permits, and bribes paid to officials in other towns where similar projects had been pushed through. Each revelation sent ripples through the courtroom with gasps audible from the audience. But the most powerful moments came when witnesses took the stand. Old Tom, leaning heavily on his cane, recounted stories of Alex's grandfather fighting to preserve the lake. His voice cracked with emotion as he described how the community had rallied together in the past to protect their home. Mrs. Harper, the baker, talked about how the lake brought families together, sharing anecdotes of children learning to swim and couples celebrating anniversaries by its shores. Even Sarah, the whistleblower, testified under oath, exposing the unethical practices of Victoria's company in painstaking detail. Victoria sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her usual confidence wavering. Her polished exterior seemed to crack slightly as each piece of evidence mounted against her. When it was finally her turn to speak, she tried to regain control. Standing up, she addressed the court with practiced poise, insisting that her intentions were noble. "I'm here to create opportunities," she said, her voice steady but lacking its usual conviction. "To build something beautiful that benefits everyone." Her words might have carried more weight if they hadn't been overshadowed by the mountain of evidence stacked against her. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the tide had clearly turned. Alex's lawyer delivered a stirring speech, reminding the judge and everyone present that this case wasn't just about property lines or legal technicalities. It was about preserving a way of life, protecting the environment, and honoring promises made long ago. "We're not asking for special treatment," she concluded. "We're asking for fairness, for integrity, for respect for the laws that exist to safeguard our communities and natural resources." When the judge announced that a verdict would be delivered the following day, Alex felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The waiting game was excruciating, but he tried to stay positive. That evening, he joined his supporters at the lake, where they held another impromptu gathering. Lanterns hung from tree branches cast a warm glow over the water, and the mood was cautiously hopeful. People shared food, laughter, and quiet conversations, finding comfort in each other's company. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. Everyone wanted to hear the judge's decision. As the judge read aloud his findings, the room grew so quiet you could hear the rustle of papers. He methodically went through the evidence, dismantling Victoria's claims one by one. The forged documents, the ignored conservation agreement, the blatant disregard for environmental concerns, all of it pointed to one undeniable conclusion. In light of the facts presented, the judge said firmly, this court rules in favor of the defendant, Alexander Reynolds. His ownership of the disputed property is valid and legally binding. Furthermore, all activities related to the proposed development are hereby ceased until further notice. The room erupted. Cheers broke out among Alex's supporters, while murmurs of disbelief rippled through Victoria's side. Alex himself sat frozen for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Then, overwhelmed with gratitude, he turned to shake hands with his lawyer and hug those closest to him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the enormity of the victory, not just for himself, but for the entire community. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Alex, firing questions left and right. But instead of focusing solely on himself, he used the opportunity to thank everyone who had supported him. "This isn't my win, it's ours," he told them, gesturing to the crowd behind him. "We did this together because we believe in protecting what matters." Meanwhile, Victoria slipped away quietly, avoiding the cameras and angry glares. Within days, her company dismantled the equipment they'd brought to the lake, and the guards stationed near Alex's cabin disappeared. It was as if she'd never been there, at least physically. Her actions had left scars on the town, dividing neighbors and sparking heated debates that wouldn't fade overnight. But slowly, healing began. In the weeks that followed, the community came together like never before. Cleanup efforts intensified, with volunteers planting native shrubs along the shoreline and repairing trails damaged during the dispute. Local artists created murals celebrating the lake's beauty, turning blank walls into vibrant tributes. Even businesses got involved, donating proceeds from sales to fund educational programs about conservation. For Alex, the experience changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Before, he'd seen the lake primarily as a personal sanctuary, a place tied to his family's history. Now he understood its broader significance. It wasn't just his home, it belonged to everyone who loved it. And with that realization came a sense of responsibility. To care for it, protect it, and ensure it remained untouched for generations to come. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the water, Alex stood on his dock. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Mist hovered above the surface of the lake, just as it had on the morning Victoria first appeared. But this time, everything felt different. The weight that had pressed down on him for months was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. He glanced at the old cabin, then out at the shimmering water. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: the lake, and its spirit, would endure. The days following the court's decision brought a mix of emotions for Alex and the town. Relief washed over everyone who had fought so hard to protect the lake, but there was also a lingering sense of caution. Victoria's sudden departure left behind unanswered questions. What would happen to her company? Would they try to return with new tactics or lawyers? For now, though, the community allowed themselves to breathe easier, reveling in their hard-fought victory. In the weeks that followed, life around the lake began to settle into a rhythm of restoration and renewal. The orange flags marking supposed construction zones were pulled up, and the heavy machinery parked nearby disappeared without a trace. Nature seemed to reclaim its space almost immediately. Wildflowers bloomed along the shoreline, birds returned to their nests, and fish swam freely once more. It was as if the lake itself was healing after months of tension. Alex took an active role in leading efforts to restore the area. He organized volunteer days where neighbors came together to clean up debris left behind by Victoria's team. They repaired the old dock, which had started to rot from neglect, and cleared overgrown brush along the trails. Kids helped too, picking up trash and planting saplings donated by a local nursery. Each small act felt like a step toward making the lake whole again. But Alex didn't stop there. Inspired by the unity he'd seen during the fight, he proposed creating a formal Friends of the Lake group to ensure the area remained protected in the future. At the first meeting held at the town hall, dozens of people showed up, some carrying suggestions, others simply eager to help. Together, they drafted guidelines for sustainable use of the land: no littering, limited motorboats to preserve, water quality, and regular environmental assessments to monitor wildlife health. To fund these initiatives, Alex worked with local businesses to set up a small donation system. Restaurants near the lake added a lake preservation fee to bills, while shops sold merchandise featuring artwork of the lake's scenic views. Even tourists passing through contributed, charmed by the idea of supporting such a meaningful cause. Slowly but surely, the funds grew, allowing the group to invest in projects like building eco-friendly restrooms and installing educational signs about the lake's ecosystem. As the months passed, the scars of the conflict began to fade. The division between those who supported Victoria and those who backed Alex healed, thanks in part to open dialogues hosted by the Friends of the Lake group. These meetings gave residents a chance to voice their concerns, share ideas, and find common ground. Many admitted that while they'd initially been drawn to Victoria's promises of modernization, they now saw the value in preserving the lake's natural beauty. Others apologized for doubting Alex during the early stages of the battle, acknowledging how his determination had inspired them to take action. For Alex personally, the experience transformed him in profound ways. Before, he'd thought of himself as just another resident, a quiet man content to live out his days fishing and enjoying the tranquility of the lake. But standing up against someone as powerful as Victoria forced him to dig deep, discovering strengths he didn't know he had. He learned how to lead, how to rally people around a shared goal, and most importantly, how to believe in something bigger than himself. One evening, as summer approached, Alex decided to host a celebration at the lake to thank everyone who had supported him. Tables were set up on the grassy area near his cabin, laden with homemade dishes brought by neighbors. String lights hung between trees cast a warm glow, and music played softly in the background. Families gathered around bonfires, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Laughter echoed across the water, blending with the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. During the event, several people stood up to speak. Old Tom recounted tales of Alex's grandfather, drawing parallels between the two generations, fights to protect the lake. Sarah, the whistleblower, expressed her gratitude for being welcomed into the community despite her connection to Victoria's company. And Mrs. Harper presented Alex with a framed photograph of the lake at sunrise, inscribed with a message, "To Alex, our hero, thank you for reminding us what truly matters." Touched by the gesture, Alex addressed the crowd. "This isn't my victory," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's ours. Every single person here played a part in protecting this place we love. We proved that when we stand together, we can overcome anything." Afterward, as fireworks lit up the night sky, Alex wandered down to the dock alone. He sat on the edge, letting his feet dangle above the cool water. The reflection of the colorful bursts danced on the surface, creating a mesmerizing display. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely at peace. Looking back, Alex realized how much he'd grown, not just as a person, but as a steward of the land. This lake wasn't just his family's legacy. It was a living, breathing entity that connected everyone who cherished it. Whether it was the laughter of children splashing in the shallows, the quiet moments spent fishing at dawn, or the simple joy of watching the sunset paint the horizon, the lake had a way of weaving itself into people's lives. And yet, Alex knew the work wasn't done. There would always be challenges ahead, new developers, changing climates, or unforeseen threats. But he also knew that as long as people cared enough to fight for it, the lake would endure. With the Friends of the Lake group in place and a renewed sense of purpose within the community, he felt confident that the lake would remain a sanctuary for years to come. As the last firework faded into darkness, Alex leaned back on his hands, gazing up at the stars. The air smelled sweet, tinged with the faint scent of wood smoke from the bonfires. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted softly, and the rustling leaves whispered secrets only the wind could understand. In that moment, Alex felt deeply connected, not just to the lake, but to the entire world around him. He smiled to himself, knowing he'd done everything he could to protect this piece of paradise. Whatever the future held, he was ready. After all, the lake wasn't just his home. It was a promise. A promise to honor the past, cherish the present, and safeguard the future. And Alex intended to keep it.